1920 movies. Starting from silent films to talkies, the 1920s showcased a broad spectrum of films. The 1920s was one of the most significant decades in the history of film. The films in the 1920s impacted us as a society forever, from humor to culture. These films impacted our culture in a significant way and influence a lot of stuff as we know it today. Silent films are movies that have no sound in them. Title cards were often used in silent films and they explain the plot or scene. These title cards help the audience understand the plot or scene. The technology to sync sound to a movie was not available yet, so many films in the early 1920s were silent. Silent films were often filmed in 16 FPS. Sometimes there was a narrator for the cards or a live orchestra to play for dramatic scenes. The narrator read these cards off into a microphone and the audience could hear it. Besides that, these films were completely silent. Some notable films are Way Down East, The Gold Rush, Ben-Hur, and The Circus. Way Down East was one of the highest grossing films of the 1920s. It came out in 1920 and was directed by D.W. Griffith. It grossed approximately $5 million. This movie's plot consisted of a poor country girl who tricks a handsome man into marrying her. They have a wedding and then she becomes pregnant, but then the man leaves her. This causes a lot of drama, and this film is filled with drama and romance. This movie was a fan favorite in 1920 by many people. The Gold Rush came out in 1925. This movie was directed by Charlie Chaplin. This was a silent comedy film. It was about a man who found a ton of gold, but then a devastating blizzard strikes. This blizzard causes many problems, and 3 men get stuck in a cabin and they cannot get out. These 3 men argue who gets the gold, and they fight over it, and it ends up creating a lot of drama. This movie was a silent movie and grossed $4,250,000. It is one of the highest grossing films in 1920. Another movie in the 1920s was a movie named Ben-Hur. This movie was made in 1925 and was directed by Fred Niblo. In the movie, Ben-Hur is a wealthy Jewish prince. In the movie, Ben-Hur gets falsely accused and then he gets arrested. He was sent into slave labor and worked very hard, and eventually he made it out. At the end of the film, Ben-Hur is saved by Jesus and then he makes it out. Jesus then blesses his family and it's a happily ever after. The movie grossed $5,500,000, and this is one of the highest grossing films of the 1920s. The Circus was a 1920 silent film that was made in 1928. This movie was also directed by Charlie Chaplin. The Circus was a movie in which Chaplin gets chased by police and then he stumbles upon a main circus show. After he stumbles upon this main circus show, he instantly becomes a hit. The audience loved him. Chaplin tries out the next day and then he scores a job here. This movie consists of Chaplin performing for the circus and was one of the most famous films. This film grossed $3.8 million. The main stars of silent films in the 1920s were Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Ben Turpin. Charlie Chaplin is one of the most significant actors in silent film. Arguably one of the most famous, Chaplin wrote, directed, and starred in his own movies. Some notable films from Chaplin include The Circus, The Gold Rush, and The Kid. Chaplin was born in 1889 in London and he died in 1977. Chaplin influenced a lot of film today, and film would be different without him. Another famous actor in the 1920 silent films was named Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton was an American actor, filmer, producer, director, comedian, and writer. Keaton was very talented. Keaton was one of the most famous American actors at the time. Some notable films from Buster Keaton include The General, The Cameraman, and Sherlock Jr. Buster Keaton was an American favorite by many. He was born in 1898 and he died in 1966. The next silent film actor was named as Ben Turpin. Ben Turpin was an American comedian actor, and he was best remembered for his work in silent films. Ben Turpin's trademarks were his cross-eyed appearance and vigorous physical comedy. Some Ben Turpin movies are Idle Eyes, A Small Town Idol, and The Shriek of Arby. He was born in 1869 and then he died in 1940. Another form of movies in the 1920s were called talkies. Talkies were sound films which had synchronized sound or sound technology coupled to image, as opposed to a silent film. The first sound film in 1926 was made by Warner and was called Don Juan. The movie was revolutionary in film because it shifted the entire way movies were made. It introduced a new way to make film and produce movies. At the time, talkies were still exclusive to bigger companies, but later they got more and more widely available to the public. The 1920s was a very significant era for filming. Films shifted from silent films to movies with sound. Without the 1920s, films today would be different. The following are two clips from two movies in the 1920s.